On today's show, two play-in sleepers get wins. Are we overlooking the Nets and the Clippers? The Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks get their 50th wins of the season. How have they stormed back this season after starting really slow? We'll talk about all those teams and every game on the association. Let's have some fun on a Thursday. Nick Angstadt, Pat the Designer on today's Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome. You are Locked On to the NBA. My name is Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavericks podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs and Locked On NBA your first listen every single day. Remember, Locked On NBA is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Thanks for getting us to 5,000 subs. Let's keep it going. Playoffs. Let's keep it going. And joining me, as always, on a Thursday now. Was it 3 in a row? 4 in a row streak?
3 in a row. 3 in a row.
What
More than I can say about the Bulls.
Host of Locked On Bulls, along with Hayes, it's Pat the Designer. What you got for me?
Hey, Boston. Wow. Yeah. Shout out to y'all.
we don't have to do it just yet. You don't have to get sad just yet. We can get sad a little later. Let's start with the game of the night. Question mark? A lot of weird games in the association. Only 6, though. We're used to these 11, 12, 13 game slates, so I'm excited to dive into a couple of these teams here.
Yeah.
The Brooklyn Nets get a win 110-98 against the New York Knicks. The Knicks had built a 21-point lead, and they led for most of the second quarter and the third quarter. But from the 4-minute and 36-second mark in the third quarter till the end of the game, the Nets outscored the Knicks 50-20. Kevin Durant, I don't know if you heard of this guy. He's pretty good. He outscored the Knicks 21-20. He outscored him by himself. Pat, KD is just he's next level.
Yeah, that's the best player in the NBA. I don't care who wants to argue with me.
Not Giannis. Not Embiid.
Listen,
not Jokic.
Listen, they may be the MVP. Everybody knows that's the best player in the NBA, and he showed it tonight, absolutely coming out and dominating the New York Knicks. I feel like Stephen A. Smith said it best, dog. Stephen A. Smith went into halftime. His team was up, I believe, 17 at the half.
You said
and they just looked at him, and they were like, Stephen A., you're not smiling. He was like, the Knicks. It's the Knicks. They're setting me up for heartbreak. I know we're going to blow this lead. Guess what?
You got to do the voice.
They did. Let me
the New York Knicks are a disgrace.
Right now, brother. Hold on. It's the Knicks, baby. You know what I'm saying? Like the New York Knicks right now are about to set me up for a failure. So are we really surprised? I think that we were all more surprised and even more concerned. Like, wait a minute, are the Nets really struggling to get through this play-in section that they're guaranteed to be in now?
Because they control their own destiny, and they still do. Like, they can still get to the 7th seed right now, especially since they won this game. But we're like, oh, they play the Knicks, they play the Pacers, then they also have this Cavs game. So if they win all those games, then all of a sudden, and we're like, oh, we're just overlooking this Knicks game. But
yeah.
The Knicks coming out and giving it to them in the first half.
It's going to be – I think this is big for Brooklyn. I think, listen, it's big for you getting hot at the right time, especially for them going into the playoffs. You're going to be playing the best teams in the NBA coming up in this playoff series, so you want to be playing your best basketball at that point when you've got Kevin Durant coming out and single-handedly outscoring a Knicks team. I mean, the Knicks literally in the third and fourth quarter put up 15 points and 16 points. Like, when you've got him playing at that level and how this team came out in that second half and really just dominated everything, you saw Thibs losing his mind. Shout out to Thibs, brother. Get out of there.
Here
get
we go again.
I think that's 3 weeks in a row I've said shout out Thibs. I'm not going to lie to you. But you got 32 from him, 24 from Kyrie.
Tibbs.
That's what you want to see from this team. And then, of course, working Seth Curry back into it, man. I think that it's going to be Brooklyn is still a scary team to have to play in a first round.
You know what I'm seeing from KD too that's different? Like, obviously, so he waits around now. He waits around in some of these games. Like, he had 21 points from the end of the third quarter till the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
He only finished with 32, right? So he only had 11 points up until then. He finished with a triple-double. He had 11 assists, and it's the passing. It's the passing from KD because he has to be the point guard. They don't have Harden anymore, right? That Kyrie is like, he's more of a shooting guard than he played next to LeBron, and that's the only point guard that's worked well next to LeBron, and that's because he's not really like a real, like a handle the ball all the time point guard. So Kevin Durant has taken on those playmaking, the playmaking like responsibilities, and he gets doubled a ton. And so part of that is kicking the ball out, and the passing has just been different from KD that I've seen this season.
Yeah.
And you look at this Nets team, they're 10-5 in their last 15. They've only had 7 games with KD and Kyrie, which is insane. But in those 7 games, they played 800 possessions together. They have a plus 11 net rating. They have a 124 points per 100 possessions offensive rating. That's like an insane rating. And then 113 points per 100 possession defensive rating, which is like fine. But that KD and Kyrie still now represent still like a real dangerous team, because right now, like, let's say they beat the Cavs in this next game that they play. If they beat the Cavs and they beat the Pacers, they're the 7th seed. They only have to win 1 game then. They beat the Cavs in the play-in, let's say. When it could be the Hawks actually still too. But let's say they win that first play-in game. Then all of a sudden they're playing either the Celtics, the Bucks, or the Sixers. Most likely the Celtics at this point. If I'm the Celtics, I'm still worried about that team. I'm not just overlooking the best player in the NBA.
Yeah. If you're either any of these teams, listen, if you're Miami, right, you're praying, hey, keep winning. Just avoid us altogether.
Yeah.
We don't want to see you. Like, if you're anybody at the top of this division, Boston, Miami, whoever it is, and Kevin Durant walks into your building and you won 50 plus games this season,
I would pick the Sixers. I would pick the Nets over the Sixers right now, like straight up.
yes. Yeah, 100%.
In a series.
And here's the thing, right? They're a better team than what we've seen. Now, I think that they have to do a lot more. Like tonight, Kevin Durant had to play 42 minutes. Kyrie Irving had to play 42 minutes. Like, that does take a toll on you, but they're also Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Like, when they get it going, if they get it going early, the Nets' problem has been what? Defensively. You know what I'm saying? We saw in this first half, the Knicks were scoring at will. All of a sudden, the Knicks just did what the Knicks do, and they started falling off the planet. But the Knicks were scoring at will versus this team. The Nets defensively is going to be their biggest issue, but that doesn't mean that they can't come out and give every single one of these teams a bucket. And the one thing that I will say versus the Philadelphia 76ers, if they were to find a way to get higher up in there and match up against them, Philadelphia is legitimately one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA. Still have been just about all season.
It's like Embiid and no one else.
It's Embiid and no one else. And so this team here, I mean, you had Kevin Durant tonight with 10 rebounds, and then you just look down the slate. Kyrie had 8. Andre Drummond had 9 in 17 minutes, by the way. Like, he's that level of guy. Claxton had 7. You know what I'm saying? Brown had 7. Like, if they can get the rebounds and you can get this Brooklyn Nets team second chance shots, say Kyrie does miss a shot, and now you get a second chance opportunity with KD. That's a scary team straight up.
I wouldn't want to be the Heat. I think that between the Heat and the Sixers, I would pick the Nets straight up. I think Bucks and Celtics, I would think about it a little bit, but I think I would pick the Nets straight up against either of those two other East teams. Another team that's in the play-in right now is the Los Angeles Clippers. They get Paul George back for the 4th game. They went down in this game by 39 in the 3rd quarter, early in the 3rd quarter. You texted me and I was like, I think this game is over, right? And you're like, it's 75-30 something. I was like, holy cow. And then all of a sudden they cut it to what, 4 points?
6 at 1.4.
Yeah, they cut it to 4 points at the end of the game, when nobody was really playing at this point, so it didn't really matter. And the Suns, to give them credit, nobody was playing for the Suns tonight. Ayton out, Booker out, Crowder out, Chris Paul out.
Soreness.
Yeah, everybody's feeling something. Everybody's holding a hammy or an ankle or a knee. Adam Silver gives his talk. He's like, we got to make sure our stars play the games that they're in. And the Nets are all like, we're just too good to play any of these games.
I miss my hot tub session.
Got a shoulder thing. But this Clippers team, Norman Powell's first game. Norman Powell, his first game back in a while. He's only played 4 games for this Clippers team. I didn't even realize it hadn't been that many at all. He scores 24 points off the bench for them. He is massive, and a real big difference. Him and Robert Covington are a big difference between this Clippers team and last Clippers team last year that went to the Western Conference Finals. If I'm going to do the same thing we just did for the Nets. If I'm the Grizzlies or the Warriors, if I'm either of those two teams, I do not want to play this. I do not want to play this Clippers team in a first round series. Actually, I don't think the Warriors could, to be honest. But
listen, this is the weird thing about this that no one is paying attention to. Here's the other thing as well. Paul George has been on a minutes restriction.
Yeah.
So everything you're seeing is like Paul George trying to be like methodical and work himself back into it, just get himself playoff ready. And they are coming out and absolutely dominating teams. Like even when my Bulls got a dub against them, right? Like I still think just because Caruso did such a great job against them, it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. But Paul George didn't play in overtime. So, like, not having him all the way there, and you were destroying this team when he was in the dog. This game was hilarious. Me and you were talking about it. 9 points in the second quarter from the Phoenix Suns. And then on the flip side,
the Suns with nobody, but yeah, still.
The Suns with nobody. But yes, still, NBA players scored 9 points in the second quarter. On the flip side, the Clippers scored 34. Don't know how the game got away from them there, dude. By the way, in the first quarter, 22. They went and did a half with 31 points. Like that's not a good look right there, dude. So like they come out of this, and by the end of it, we're sitting there laughing. We're looking around, we're like, hey, they slowly work their way back into this. So like we could talk about Memphis being a tough matchup for them. I think that the Clippers could take anybody to 7, but I'm going to be honest with you, bro. Full slate Suns, they played them already. This team pretty much comes back the exact same. They know what the tendencies are. You didn't have Kawhi Leonard last year in this series. A 1-8 matchup with the Suns and the Clippers. I am rooting for that. I am personally rooting for that because I feel like we get a punch in the mouth right off the bat. Let's go. I want to see that. I want to see if Paul George got it in him.
The other thing I want to say is that if they play the Grizzlies the first round, I may pick the Clippers in that series.
Yes.
A lot has been said about, and the Grizzlies have been awesome. They have the second best record in the NBA. They've been incredible this year. A lot has been said about Ja Morant not playing games and the Grizzlies still winning. Okay. Well, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Dillon Brooks have only played 300 possessions together. That's like 3-ish games that they've played together this year. All of a sudden, they're just going to come back and they're just going to have to put this all together. A young team without a ton of playoff experience have to put it all together to go into this first round. And they play a team like the Clippers that do not care who you are, right? They don't care if you're the Jazz and you're supposed to win this series because you have Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and your team doesn't have Kawhi Leonard. They do not care about that. So that is a fascinating potential first round series if they get past the Wolves. First of all, let's give the Wolves some credit. They've been really, really good the second half of the year. And so we'll give the Wolves credit. They have to beat them in that one game. But they play the Grizzlies team. That's going to be a fascinating series. Coming up, the Celtics take down your Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about what happened to the Bulls. What's been happening to this Bulls team? We'll talk about that. We'll also get into Atlanta, Washington, and then Dallas and Utah. Later in the episode, we'll talk about them. But before we do, let me tell you about betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters. You a golf guy?
I like a little golf, man. I like a little golf. Let's see what Tiger got this weekend, man. He talking like he going to come back and win this thing.
Do you believe that you could win this? I do. And then it's just all over everywhere. Like everyone's just like, he believes he can win. Like, oh, okay, cool. Lots of stuff on BetOnline. You can go check it out. They also have this Lakers next head coach odds. Are you ready for these? Number 1, David Fizdale, plus 300. Quinn Snyder, plus 450. Doc Rivers, plus 475. Gotta love the guys with a job already.
Yeah, I know, right?
Nick Nurse, plus 600. Mike Brown, pretty sure the Lakers have already done that, plus 700. Sam Cassell, plus 700. Steve Clifford, plus 700. Kenny Atkinson. Let's go all the way down to the bottom. Here's some wild ones that BetOnline has. Phil Jackson, plus 10,000.
Put the money on there because Phil's been talking like he might want to get back into coaching. I see an interview with him.
Just put $1 on there. You'll win
$1 on it. Plus
you'll win $100 if he gets it. Mike Krzyzewski, is he done? Is he not? Finally comes to the NBA. Plus 10,000. Phil Jackson and Mike Krzyzewski, the same odds to be.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't know.
And then the coup de grace, plus 15,000. LeBron James to be the Lakers' next head coach. Check it out on BetOnline. It's BetOnline where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You were not ready for that LeBron.
I wasn't,
James
bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought Rondo was coming. I figured it was gonna be a player, right? At 15,000, I thought Rondo was coming, maybe, or like a former like point guard or something like that. Like,
Bet online, right in their bag with the LeBron
player
James
coach.
next.
He's Bill Russell in it. Let's do it.
Hey, no one has done this before. He'd probably come out and be like, no one has taken on this mantle before except for me. Oh man. Moving on in the NBA. What should have been the best game of the night? The Boston Celtics beat the Chicago Bulls 117-94. The former president Obama, he showed up. He was there. The Bulls did not show up for the Chicago native. The Celtics. Let's start with them first. The Celtics get 25 from Jaylen Brown, only 16 from Jayson Tatum. It was just a rout from the beginning of this game. Boston has now clinched the top 4 seed. They have 50 wins. They started the year 23-24 since January 22nd. This is since January 22nd. You ready for this? They have the best offense in the NBA, 119.8 points per 100 possessions. The best offense by a whole point. They also are the best defense in the NBA since January 22nd. 104 points per 100 possessions. That's 5 points per 100 possessions better than the number 2 team. Like, they are the best defense by far since the turn of the calendar year, and the best offense. This Boston Celtics team is something else right now.
Yeah, and it showed tonight. When they forced the Bulls to have 17 turnovers. They did a great job scoring off of those turnovers. They've done a great job over this stretch, really forcing teams into becoming teams that they're not used to being, right? They're forcing teams to making plays and putting players in position where, hey, listen, yeah, you go ahead and you make a play tonight, but I guarantee you that Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan or whoever it is will not. They've done a great job at that. And on the other end, when they're running a system, they do a great job at, hey, let's run this pick and roll. Let's get out here. But they also can just kill you straight up. They killed the Bulls tonight. I didn't see a lot of pick and roll. They just killed them. Like Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Daniel Tice getting in on it. And I'll tell you right now, don't sleep on the fact that they're running a lineup of Daniel Tice and Al Horford. A lot of people said, hey, you know what I'm saying? The Celtics are going to really
miss Time Lord.
Yeah, they're going to miss Time Lord a ton. Daniel Tice and Al Horford, Daniel Tice, former Chicago Bull, after last year, we wanted him back for this reason, because he can come out, he can give you good minutes, he can give you really good production, he can give you not only offense, but on the defensive end, that hard hustle and muscle. And also, Al Horford has been there before, and he's always somebody where I don't need you to do too much, just go out there and do your job. And when he does his job, he does it well, and he's been doing it for forever in this NBA, dog. So don't sleep on them at all. Yeah,
the Celtics, or it'll be interesting to see if they have to face the Sixers in a series. Like if it winds up they're like the 2-3 and they meet in the second round. That'll be wild to see how they defend Embiid. But Horford has actually been pretty good at defending Embiid throughout his career. So that's a fascinating one. And then the Bucks, it'll be interesting to see how they defend them because of their lack of size. But for everybody else, they're set. Like they can take them, right? Like they're ready. And this team has been absolutely incredible. And I don't know, man. Is this is the best team in the East? Are the Bucks still there?
I have a tough time not giving the team with the crown that hasn't had drastic change the edge over a lot of people. Championship pedigree means a ton.
For sure.
When you have to fall back on something, the fact that you're an NBA champion, the fact that you just won the NBA championship, and the fact that you've taken out a lot of teams that you might say are on par or better than the Boston Celtics. Now, granted, you might bring in, well, they weren't healthy, but like you look at what the Phoenix Suns are doing right now. Hey, we beat them. The fact that they can fall back on that, for me, it'll still always be the Milwaukee Bucks until somebody
have the best player in the series.
Yeah. And Giannis can just be like, hey, can you get out of my way real quick? I'm gonna dunk the ball real quick. So we got to see him recently too, and it's just like an adjustment for Giannis. It's like, am I gonna dunk on you here or here?
All right, I'm gonna get out of the way for you real quick right here. ISO. I'm gonna clear it out for you right here. What happened to this Chicago Bulls team? Because we were all riding high on them. DeMar DeRozan was having that run where he was like tying Wilt Chamberlain, passing Wilt Chamberlain for like 35-point games. And now all of a sudden this Bulls team is 45 and 35. They're not going to move up. It doesn't look like here against the Raptors for the 5th seed. So they're going to stay at 6. What happened to this Bulls team?
I think Billy Donovan said it best. He said, "You're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are when things are getting bad." And as you look at this team, they were on such a hot streak, beating a lot of these teams, doing a lot of good things, but still struggling versus those best teams in the Eastern Conference, Western Conference, stuff like that. And now they played a tougher schedule. He said, "I was looking forward to it because it exposes what you do wrong." And tonight, games like tonight have exposed what the Bulls do wrong. The Bulls, they just haven't been there. They don't have the experience. They don't have the understanding of, hey, like, we can't come out lackadaisical in these games. Patrick Williams has been in the NBA 2 years. He's calling out the team's defensive effort at the beginning of the game, telling them, hey, listen, we start these games off like we're the best defensive team in the league, and then we're down 14, and all of a sudden we're trying to fight our way back in. That's just not a good way to win. It's not a good way to compete. And I think that there just aren't a lot of players on this team that have the experience of being in games like this. I mean, you think about, let's be real. Our 3 best players are Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. Nikola Vucevic was on the Magic, terrible. Zach LaVine has been on the Bulls and the Wolves when they were both terrible. DeMar DeRozan is the only player with any experience, and guess what? He's the only one that's been able to score. And we've said, oh, why is DeMar running so much ISO ball? Because every time we pass it to somebody else, they can't hit a shot. The Bulls since the All-Star break have shot like, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, I think it's like 25% from the three-point line, where they were one of the best teams in the NBA. They're still top 4 because of how great they were shooting the ball at the beginning of the season. And so now it's getting to the point where you're playing these tougher teams. You're playing teams that are getting ready for the playoffs, and they're playing you completely different. And the Bulls just haven't been able to adjust to it. And so because of that, you've seen the drop-off. You've seen them lose. I mean, we came into from the All-Star break
26.6% from 3 after the All-Star break.
26.6. It's not pretty. It's a complete drop off, and you've seen teams literally adjust. Like, everybody's like, why is Vooch so bad inside? Why aren't they going inside? Why aren't they driving the ball? Because teams are literally saying, hey, guess what? You do whatever you want to do out there. We'll give you every shot. Because if you hit 38% from behind the 3-point line, you deserve to win tonight.
26 attempts per game. They shot 33% on those attempts, but 26 attempts per game is the lowest by 3 attempts in the NBA. Like, they're just not taking threes, right? Like, they're just literally not. So even if they're making 33% of them, which sounds like fine, that's just also bad. That's 28th in the NBA since All-Star. So,
well, I mean, when you get to a point where every time I give you one, you miss it, at a certain point, you got to say, hey, stop taking that. You know what I mean? So it's about how they get their buckets. You know what I'm saying? DeMar DeRozan is, of course, the mid-range assassin. But here's the thing you got to think about with this Bulls team, man. Since the All-Star break, 39-23, right? That's where they started. They're now 45-35. That's because the scheduled uptick. You're playing nothing but playoff teams in this side of the schedule, and they're playing you, and they've been there. Other than the Cavaliers and that's it. Other than the Cavaliers, that's the only team that doesn't have that experience to be like, hey, this is the point we're at in this season. This is the way we got to play right now. Even the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors were a low seed last year. I think it was the Bulls, the Raptors, and the Cavaliers were 11th, 12th, and 13th last season. But that's because the dude that won your championship was like, yeah, I'm going to go to LA. And that kind of jump starts the process of we got to find some new people here. So, like, Toronto, I don't even hold in that same regard because they have championship experience on their team. Other than Cleveland Cavaliers, everyone else has playoff experience, and they have something they can fall back on. The Bulls don't.
Coming up, let's get into the Dallas versus Detroit game. We got Utah versus a team wearing OKC jerseys, and then, of course, the Hawks versus the Washington Wizards. We'll talk about them coming up. But all right, Pat, let's get into some of these other games. The Dallas Mavericks get a win over the Detroit Pistons. It was an ugly one. It was an ugly one for a while. I'm not going to lie to you. 45 fouls in this game, 69 total free throws. Dallas Mavericks get their 50th win. They started the season 16-18. Luka and Brunson, 50 points combined in this one. 4 other Mavericks in double figures. Dallas still has an opportunity to get the 3 seed right here. Dallas only has 2 games left. They win their next 2 games, and Golden State loses any of their last 3 games. The Mavericks would move up to the 3 seed. And so the Mavericks are hoping they win all their games. There's still a whole bunch of different scenarios. Our guy, Matt Moore, HP Basketball on Twitter, has all the scenarios. So go check out his Twitter feed. He is obsessed with the clinching scenarios. But the Mavericks can still get the 3 seed in this one. The Dallas Mavericks are going into this right now. If they get the 3 seed, they'll probably play the Nuggets. They stay at 4, and they can clinch home court with just one more win or a Jazz loss. The Mavericks are feeling good about either of those teams. The Mavericks have been playing really well. They're mirroring what Boston is doing. Now they're tailing off a little bit here. Their defense is not as elite as it had been for about a month and a half. Their defense was right up there with Boston for about a month and a half after the turn of the calendar year, after Porzingis went down, basically.
Yeah.
And then, but then their offense had been pretty good after being average through the rest of the year. Dallas is feeling good about either of these teams because Luka Doncic can get you through anything, honestly, right? Like he is one of the few guys. He has one of the highest usage percentage in the NBA, right there with Embiid, right there with Giannis. And he can get you anywhere. He can get you past either of those teams, Utah or Denver. Who's going to guard him on either of those teams, right? It's Royce O'Neal. It's Rudy Gobert and those switches that we saw in some of those. Like, okay, they'll live with that.
Yeah.
As long as they can hit threes, as long as they're going to be open threes, and Luka can create open threes off anybody. For Denver, it's like Aaron Gordon. Okay, that's a good defender against Luka. But then all of a sudden, everywhere else is just exposed. Like all the Dinwiddie and Brunson will feast against those teams because no one else can guard on the perimeter. Dallas is feeling really good right now. Utah, we'll get into them in a second. Mitchell and Conley sat out in this one. Bojan Bogdanovic had 27. Gobert had 20 and 10 in this one. Let's talk about these two teams, Dallas and Utah. What's your biggest question about the Mavericks heading into the playoffs?
I would ask, and of course, you being the Mavericks expert, check out Locked On Mavs. Shout out to them.
Ooh.
Doing great stuff over there.
There
I would ask you, can Spencer Dinwiddie's offensive output replace what Tim Hardaway would have given you now that you now know he's not coming back in the playoffs? And even on the defensive side, right? Like, I want to know, like, I know the Mavs can score. I know Luka can score. I know Dinwiddie can score. I know that these guys, when they get hot, they can score with anybody. But when you start getting later on, right, I need to know, and like you said, this Mavs defense has tailed off just a little bit. But when you get to, I mean, possibly the Suns or Clippers or Grizzlies or Warriors or whoever it may be, are you going to be able to make that key stop? Do you feel like that's an issue that the Mavs are going to deal with when they play these teams that are sitting above them?
Yeah, the Dinwiddie one. Let's start with that. Is a great question because last year, listen to the guys that were playing that are handling the ball for the Mavericks in the playoffs. Yeah. It's Luka Doncic. It's Brunson for a little bit. First 4 games of the Clippers series, he averaged 20 minutes a game. Last 3 games, he averaged 10 minutes a game. He got benched in that series. He was not the player that we're seeing this year.
Yeah.
Tim Hardaway Jr. played a lot, played 37 minutes a game in all 7 of those games. Josh Richardson basically got benched too. He played 13 minutes a game. And then it was Trey Burke, played in 2 games. Like literally that's all the guards that would handle the ball in those series. And now Brunson has taken a step forward. Brunson has been able to stay on the court defensively so that he doesn't get played off. And then Dinwiddie, that's a good question. Can he be a little bit better in the playoffs? Can he be the way that he was when he first came over and fill up what Hardaway did? Because Hardaway did play well in the playoffs. Like he used 17 points a game, 40% from 3. He took 8 threes a game. He was their secondary offense, way more so than Porzingis was. Porzingis was 13 points a game last year in the
That's
playoffs.
The problem.
He was just in the corner. And so now you have 2 of these guys that can fill it up, and they need to have Dinwiddie or Brunson step up in a big way in those playoff series. But they're at least there and capable. Yeah. They're at least there to handle the ball where they just did not have it before. And so where the Mavs would lose those games against the Clippers was as soon as Luka would sit, everybody it would all just go to the tank. It would all just completely go out. My biggest question for Utah, if we're talking about that team, there's a lot of questions. Can you contain Luka? Right? Can you keep Gobert involved enough so that he factors on offense? Those are.
Did you see the stat?
The two passes a game. that Quinn Snyder was not a fan of anyone pointing out, by the way.
Hey, listen. The fact that Gobert averages double that, and that's still only 4 passes a game back to Donovan Mitchell, tells you that there is a problem there. It's like, hey, listen, I give him the ball, but you got to move it around to 4 other people before it get to him.
Yeah, so those are my questions for the Jazz, right? Against the Dallas Mavericks. We've seen the Jazz beat the Mavericks 2 times this year. You know, we've seen that Jazz team get really hot. They have more experience than the Mavericks do. And so you can see a path where they're winning that series. Against the Warriors, it honestly seems a little bit harder to me. But that Warriors team is not in a good spot. Like, they're probably in a worse spot than the Jazz are right now. Yeah. Talk about 2 teams limping into the end of the season. If those 2 teams play against each other, that would be wild to see. Who can figure it out faster? It's probably I'm gonna guess it's Steph and them, but Donovan Mitchell has stepped up in a playoff series and has really taken it to another team. So that's Dallas and Utah, where they're sitting right now. They'll probably play each other, but it could be Utah, Golden State, could be Dallas, Denver. So those are the big matchups coming up. But the other 2 teams that these 2 teams play, Detroit and OKC, these teams are not playing for anything. Detroit is actually winning games they're not supposed to. OKC is winning games they're not supposed to at all. Which of these teams do you think is doing a better job at a rebuild? Let me lay out these 2 teams for you right here. Detroit has Cade, obviously, as their main piece. Saddiq Bey is a really good secondary piece. And then they got all these other guys. Bagley, Killian Hayes, Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, and then Frank Jackson, who's only 23. I always feel like he's older, but he's not. And then they have the Jeremy Grant piece. It's definitely going to be a trade piece this offseason. They'll figure out a way to turn that into something. And, of course, their pick. OKC has SGA as their big piece. Great. Lou Dort, Josh Giddey as great complementary pieces for him. Then they have all these random guys that you're like, are these guys good, or are they just the only guys that are shooting the ball right now? Yeah. In Darius Baisley, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Aaron Wiggins, Trey Mann, who can fill it up, Isaiah Roby, and Poku. Which of these teams do you think is doing a better job of rebuilding right now?
As much as it pains me to say, based on the beef between the 2 cities, I have to give it to the Detroit Pistons, because Detroit is putting players on the floor that are contributing to wins right now. Now, only 23 wins.
OKC's just not putting players on the floor.
OKC's just not putting players on the floor, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, OKC's just like, yeah, he's dead. That's an injury, right?
Teo Maledon is just visiting his family in France.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's a tough time. But I mean, here's the difference for me, right? And it's really what I've looked at. I have to give credit to God. I hate giving credit to the Pistons for anything.
Oh no.
I have to give credit to the Pistons, right, for picking correctly. Cade seemed like an iffy pick at the beginning of the season. We're now at the end of the season, and it feels like he could be a candidate, a legitimate candidate, not just like, well, there's no one else, a legitimate candidate for Rookie of the Year. He is for sure somebody that is not, and here's the thing, that is not just playing, but is making other people better. If you looked at Saddiq Bey and his output the last few years, you're like, yeah, he plays basketball. This season, I'm like, oh, Saddiq Bey and Cade might actually be a nice little combo. You bring it, you know what I'm saying? So, like, you have
like it's like a bizarro Tatum and Brown, right?
Yes, that is the perfect way to describe it, because, like, when you watch it, it's like these guys play really well off of each other. They do a good job at kind of like just putting each other in a position to both be successful, and that's the beginning of this, right? Like, let's be real. If SGA's not doing everything for OKC, they're done.
Dort has been sneaky good this year. Dort has added the 3 ball. Dort has been good, and Josh Giddey has had triple doubles this year. Like, Josh Giddey can do some stuff for that team. So, like, you have some complementary pieces there. Like, I think those 2 pieces are better than any second and third pieces that the Pistons have right now. Right? It's Saddiq Bey, and then who else? Who's the next best guy? Is it Killian? Killian's what? Well, but Jeremy Grant's getting traded. Like, he's not going to play on this team anymore. So.
Yeah, well, we hope. That's one of those, right? It's like Jeremy Grant was ready to go, and then he was like, "I want to be the number 1 on the team," and everybody's like, "Nah."
We got a guy named Cade.
Yeah, you're not even the number 1 on your team right now. I don't know. I feel like, you know what the other thing is with the Pistons too, like, for me, right, like Dwayne Casey being there is an underrated thing for the Pistons. Like he was the coach of the year and then got fired.
I don't know if Pistons fans would agree with this being an underrated thing, but
They might not, but I think that with Cade Cunningham, with Sadiq Bey, with I'll give Diallo some credit. Diallo's been out for a little while, but he was playing decent basketball for them as well.
True.
You've got a coach of the year candidate that knows how to coach basketball with players that are clearly showing you that they can play basketball, and you don't know what you're going to get back for a Jeremy Grant.
Locked On Pistons host Koo is just like rolling over and his car made
he's probably just like, Dwayne Casey is the worst coach ever. I can't stand it. That's okay, man. Hey, listen, I've always
you've been there.
Listen, I got Bulls fans telling me to fire Billy Donovan right now, like we're not making the playoffs and we weren't 11th last year. So I've been there, dog. I know how you feel. He's not Jim Boylan. Let's just say that.
We've seen success, right? We've seen a track record of success in the past.
Yeah.
So
and with good players. So,
there you go. Those rebuilds are fascinating to me. Who they get in the draft. Looked at a couple of mock drafts. Couple of them had Detroit taking Paolo. That's an interesting piece for that. Like literally just replaces Jeremy Grant. Like hey, you want a younger version of a guy that's sort
essentially
of like, and then Jaden Ivey going to OKC. That's fascinating to me because that's another guy handling the ball. Whoever they get is going to be really interesting. The lottery is huge for both those teams. Last game on the slate for us, Atlanta gets the win over the Washington Wizards. At the 2-minute mark of the third quarter, it was 82-77. Atlanta was only up by 5. Trae Young scores 14 points in the next 3 minutes to end the third quarter. They were up by 12 after that. They never looked back. Trae Young, 30 points, 11 assists. He has more 30-point, 10-assist games than anybody else, I think, over this last stretch here. He's been absolutely awesome. Yep, over this season, games with 30 points and 10 or more assists. Trae Young has 20. The next closest. Do I have the thing? Have you heard this? Luka Doncic with 10. That's it, just 10. Trae Young has been filling it up for this Atlanta Hawks team this year. He's been putting up crazy numbers. And I'm feeling more and more confident the way this Hawks team is winning. They are 11-1 at home over their last 12 home games. They're also 19-3 in their last 21 home games. So this Atlanta team, they play a home game in that play-in. I'm picking them to win for sure against the Hornets. I've been going back and forth all year, but I'm feeling more confident about Atlanta today.
Yeah, they've been there, dog. That's the biggest thing for me. They've been there. Trae Young, still 28 points a game. Clint Capella, still 11 rebounds a game. Trae Young, still 9.7. Like, the things that they did to get to that Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, no John Collins, but they still have everything
I don't
else.
think they'll get, right. I think because of no John Collins, they won't get as far.
Right.
But we're talking about the Charlotte Hornets who haven't been in the playoffs since before they were the previous Charlotte Hornets. I mean, they got the play-in last year, but
you just hurt Walker Mail's heart, Rich.
That's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you talk about the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm gonna be real with you. Trae Young gets hot for a game. You don't know where they're.
Yeah, that's it, right?
They could be in the playoffs.
Sneaky for the Hawks too. They have DeAndre Hunter back. We forget that DeAndre Hunter did not play last year in the playoffs. So like they kind of just traded Collins for Hunter in this playoff run. And so we'll see how that changes it for them. But yeah, there you go. That's the slate of games in the NBA. Still a ton to figure out. Go check out HP Basketball on Twitter for all the clinching scenarios. He's got everything all figured out. Go listen to Locked On Bulls with Pat and CEO Hayes. They're doing some great stuff over there. Listen to Locked On Mavs for the rest of the Mavericks season. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA. Boom!